Thank you so much for the opportunity to share about some of my work and how to use media to build peace. I'm not sure if any of you have seen The Newsroom. How many have seen the HBO show The Newsroom? So one thing that's often repeated by Aaron Sorkin, the writer, is a democracy is best served by a well-informed electorate. And that is what drives the whole idea of what media is for, to inform, or what the news is for, to inform an electorate. So I would say that any space, a school, a city, is best served by a well-informed, media literate, and active group of people, and also regular citizens, to build peace. And so today I'm kind of coming with that perspective that the first step to building peace is understanding the media and be able to be literate and understand what it's for and what it feels its role is. So first I just want to share, there's 5 main media literacy constructs, ideas. And first one is media are constructs, are constructions. Conscious or unconscious. As you can see here, where is this? Can somebody? Russia? No. Iraq. Okay. So the first picture, how many people remember when the statue was toppled? All right. Fox News reported the toppling of the statue. And then if you pan out, we see another view. The first one, we see lots of people. It seems like a huge movement. You know, all of Iraq wants him gone. And then if you pan out, it's like 100 people. All right. This is really important because what's included and what's not included in media is just as important. What you see and what you don't see. Who you see, who you don't see. And we need to have those two in balance. Because media, whether on purpose or on accident, it has a bias. In the same way, messages are in the creator's hands. So the person that creates media has a lot of power. So journalists, how they define, how they tell a story, how they take a picture. That's a lot of power. And often it robs the dignity and the story from those that are first actors. So in a way, it's an act of violence against the people that are being portrayed in a lot of stories. And we have to be aware of that. So audiences negotiate meaning. This was a project by an artist. His name is Eric Ravello. And it was about the right to childhood. And he showed children being crucified on the backs of, what's the first one? McDonald's, right? So childhood, obesity is an issue, and it's stopping a productive childhood. That's Sandy Hook. That is a soldier. You'd have to look closely to be able to negotiate what that meaning is, right? It could be any soldier. If you've been touched by a certain conflict in any part of the world, then that would touch you more. That happens to be a Syrian government soldier in this one. And then the tourist, the sex tourist. So all of these are not initially known, right? Every person comes from this own cultural background, cultural understanding, and they take in what they see. And as the audience, you have different meanings. Until I explained it to you, maybe you thought something else. That's how we negotiate meaning. So even if I come with a pure heart trying to tell the story of children, of childhood, you still understand on a different level. And we have to know that those things are always going to be in conflict when we watch media. Media have commercial implications. So media, it's like a huge octopus, a lot of tentacles. There's a reason why they're in the business of media. It's not to only serve the public. And we have to be aware of that. This is really hard to see, but you could just see how consolidated the media is. And I think that's seen even from far away. That it's in the hands of very few. And that's something very important to watch when you know about framing and messaging. I'll give a local example from Guatemala. The main news stations in Guatemala are owned by 5 main barons, very rich people, that live in Florida. So they don't live locally, and they have a very commercial perspective. Now, Guatemala, I don't know if you're familiar, it's mostly indigenous people. So the stories and the lives of indigenous people are never told because it's just the top-tier elite that are telling the story. So a huge population is out of the story. Whereas if you would That's TV. If you transfer to radio, the majority of the radio is indigenous run. And then you'll see a very different story. So you can almost go to Guatemala and hear two different narratives happening at the same time, depending on which medium you use. So media have social and political implications. When we see a picture, who saw this picture before? Any of the three? There's three there. Okay, one person. Can you tell me where it's from? Okay, so the UN posted the picture on the top, and it's a UN worker leaning over a child. And the tweet that went out said, "Child found in the desert crossing from Syria to Jordan." Okay? So what does that say about the UN? Wow, they're saviors of our world. They're amazing, right? They're finding children in the middle of a desert. I mean, okay, what does it say about Syrian children, Syrian refugees? They're losing their children everywhere. They don't even care about their children. They're leaving them out in the desert, right? What does it say about Syrian conflict? There's so many implications, social and political implications just from the top picture. The same thing as the Iraqi picture. If you pan out, what happened is the UN quickly corrected itself, and actually a local worker corrected it and said, no. So, because CNN did a tweet. He said, no, this is actually a part of a big group. And I mean, the irony of it all is that's when the Malala that Yusuf, everybody I'm sure knows her from the Malala Fund, she was in, crossing the border. So they weren't just there, right? They were hosting a celebrity, a humanitarian celebrity, and that's why the UN was there. It's not like the UN helps refugees cross every day, first of all. So they were there to take pictures of her helping refugees. And if you pan out, you can see that he's actually part of a huge group, and his parents found him. I mean, these are whole villages that are usually family. So he's with his cousins walking. So it's a very different narrative. So when you just post a small picture, a snapshot, you can really manipulate the social and political implications. So understanding that there's more to the story is really important when you see any kind of media. And then just lastly, this is just a practical, each medium has its own aesthetic, right? So movies have their own way of telling a story. News have their own way. How many saw Argo? Okay. So Argo got a lot of critique that it has nothing to do, it's not accurate, right? Okay, it's a movie, and it's a fictional movie. Trust me, reality is pretty boring if you post day-by-day events. So when you expect a medium to show something as if it's a documentary, and if anybody's seen a really realistic documentary, they're very boring, right? So you have to tell a story, you have to show it in a certain way to be able to convey that message, right? So, but in another way, maybe the news. News has become a different medium than it should be, right? It's become an opinion platform. So when we start expecting media to deliver something that it simply is not made to do, then we have a lot of problems. And we start expecting things that can't happen, and that's when manipulation happens. So those are the 5 kind of constructs. Now I just want to move in how to use media to build peace, or how it's been used. And these are a lot of my personal projects, and also a collaborative that I worked on. I've worked a lot with Syrian activists, so a lot of the examples are from Syria. There's a lot of conflict happening in the world, and don't mean any disrespect for not representing them. These are just personal projects I'm working on. So the first step, one way that we can use media to build peace is building bridges, maybe digital diplomacy, or expanding the pie. So it's moderated dialogue, it's reframing a conflict, open multi-narrative approach to peace building. Usually most stories don't have 2 sides. Most have 5 sides, 3 sides, 10 sides. And allowing those sides, the multi-narrative approach, that it's a little bit bigger than we think, and the problem is a little bit more profound, will bring a lot of healing that people can express who they are. I'm not sure if people are familiar with the I Am Happy, we're Happy song, right? Pharrell. So there's a website, it's called We Are Happy From. It's really awesome. You can click on, it's 1,283 videos so far and adding. This was from 2 days ago, so I'm sure it's more now. And it's in 121 countries. Okay, so if people have taken a song and created it, made it their own, that they're happy. So we have British Muslims. You have youth in Hanoi, Vietnam. You have so many different ways of expressing joy, and it's really beautiful, kind of a snapshot of humanity. So I would really encourage you to go there and waste like 2 or 3 hours and just enjoy the globe. It's so beautiful. It's really beautiful to see how we've all expressed joy and happiness, and how we're all really so similar. So that's maybe an example of building bridges. It's another one. It's Iran Loves Israel campaign. He also made some memes for buses. Ronnie Edry, he's a good friend of mine, and he did a really awesome campaign to kind of, I call it a peace end story, a multi-narrative peace end story. What would peace look like? If we all get together in a room, what would peace look like in our conflict? And this is for in Israel and Palestine. And here he says, free for the weekend? Gaza, only 2 hours from Tel Aviv. So can you imagine traveling from Tel Aviv to Gaza? And that people can just travel back and forth, the airports are open, there's no security, there's no checkpoints, people are free to live and be human beings. That's the kind of history, and he's Israeli, and that's the kind of future he imagines for his own country, and that's really beautiful. And that's how he's using media to build peace and expand the pie. What is the big vision of peace? So there's another way, it's called debunking rumors, outing propaganda. So there's a lot of propaganda, and probably majority of social media is propaganda. You have many government officials that are on social media that are there for this sole purpose, and all over the world, sole purpose of pushing their narrative. And that includes our government, and that includes many Western democracies that are there to show their narrative. So we have to understand, be literate, and understand that these individuals and these mediums are really rife to promote propaganda. 2 examples. Recently in the Syrian conflict was the Free Kassab. I'm not sure if you saw that. So Kim Kardashian, who has millions of followers, tweeted out. So the story is that the true news story is that Free Syrian Army soldiers came into the city of Kassab, which is mostly Armenian, and they took the city. Now all of the Armenian population fled. Okay, this is a war. It's a conflict. And there's many different people inside of Syria. This village happened to be Armenian, which touched Kim Kardashian being Armenian in a personal way. The Syrian conflict has been going on for 3 years. It's not a new news story. But suddenly on the scene, Kim Kardashian tweets out, and I'm not sure if you could see, if you don't know what's going on in Kassab, please Google it. It's heartbreaking. As an Armenian, I grew up hearing so many painful stories. The next tweet. Please let's not let history repeat itself. Let's get this training. Save Kassab, Armenian genocide. So she linked a historical collective memory, collective trauma from Armenians with the current act. So she was interpreting this current situation that no citizens were killed. No citizens were killed. And actually, this Free Syrian Army, they had to actually report, they took videos and showed the churches that nothing was hurt, nothing was damaged. They had to do extra work to show that this was just very important land in getting more pushing forward against the Syrian army, the Assad's army. So then this got trending. So people started saying free Kassab, free Kassab. Well, she's linking 2 things, which created a rumor, right? Even if it wasn't a fact, even if it wasn't necessarily bad, but it was causing harm. So Liana, here also an Armenian, she tweeted, and she's actually local from Los Angeles, use of unverified sources, false photos, clearly from different time, country, movies, and misuse of word genocide are all doing harm. So the do no harm approach to social media is really important. Making sure that we don't have implicit messages or unintended consequences from what we tweet out. And Kim Kardashian kind of accomplished 2 with 1. The bottom one is really interesting. It's how the Gaza and Israeli conflict was understood and depicted by both sides. And both sides were on the side of propaganda in this. None of them had any rationale or showing humanity in the other side. So calling out this as propaganda on both sides is really powerful because it frees people from feeling like they have to follow the agenda of one side or the other. They kind of can feel like, oh, maybe there is another middle ground or expanding the pie. And that's what outing propaganda will do. Okay, there's reporting anthologies of injustice. So here's 3 examples that are online. Women Under Siege. It reports on women, violence against women around the world, in Congo and Syria. They do mapping. And so the idea is to collect a list of atrocities to be able to show the critical mass of what's happening against women. And these are often stories that are not told, and that's why this is so valuable, because so many stories are not being told of violence, and we're just hearing the big macro news telling us stories about the conflict in Syria or in Congo. The next one is ground views, and this is with the Sri Lankan conflict. And Sanjay Huttara, he has collected, he collected the stories of trauma and of personal stories of violence that his people, the Tamils, incurred during the conflict. And these were all lost. They were actually burned and lost, and whole histories were burned up. So collecting and reclaiming your history is a way of building peace and helping people find their identity and their place. And then Global Voices, it's a very popular website, and it's basically on-the-ground citizen journalists reporting what's happening around them on a regular basis. The next one is calling out hate speech. In the US, we have a lot of hate speech against immigrants, after the shooting at the temple, what was it? Yeah, okay. At the temple, there was a lot of people calling them Muslims, and there was a lot of hate speech happening. And the best thing you could do is call it out for what it is and say, you know what, this is not right. So there's actually a website called hatespeech.org, international.org, that reports on hate speech, and you can even upload reports. Hate speech in Syria, this is my blog piece for sale, and hate speech in Syria has happened a lot, and this is a man that has committed a lot of mass atrocities, but he uses songs and cultural violence, songs and poems, to rile up the soldiers. And then they post it on social media, they post it on YouTube. And people are riled up to fight against the Sunni Muslims. And he's actually a Turkish Alawite. So songs and use of cultural violence that are uploaded onto social media is a very powerful way of doing hate speech. So amplifying local voices. This is a project I began a year ago, and it's called The Real Housewives of Syria. And when I was in Syria, and I worked with Syrian activists, and I saw that before the Women Under Siege, it reports on atrocities of women. So even those that are on our side that do good, they still create a narrative, right? So the narrative is women are victims. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what Women Under Siege narrative is. And guess what? They are. But they're more than victims. They're actually the heads of the household, they're resilient, they're peace builders, they're organizers, they're transformative leaders. So women are more than just victims, and that's what this project was. So what I did was collect local voices of women. I have 4 profiles now and many other stories, but full profiles, to tell the story of how resilient and how Syrian women have been at the center of the revolution. And when the guns came in and the armed conflict came in, and how their power was taken away, and how they want to reclaim it. Because at the end of the day, when Syria is starting to rebuild and people start thinking who can be president, in a shame culture like Syria, the rape victim will not be president. But a woman that was a leader, a transformative peace builder, this person may or may not have been raped, but she's not a victim of her own circumstance. She's more than that. So that's what amplifying local voices could have, and it's actually their stories being told. So again, it's not one person, usually a Western with a lot of power and privilege telling the stories. They themselves are telling the stories. So they manage the Facebook page. They tell their stories. We take their pictures to show. Then the last one is collectively speaking truth to power. So the hashtag revolution. You talked about the movement. So this is how you make a movement online. Right now, if you want to be part of a movement to kind of talk about atrocities, Eye on Homes is trending, and that's been for the last few days. And there's a lot of Syrian activists trying to trend that, and it's basically pointing out to the siege in homes today, where people are dying of hunger, eating grass, and having no food because there's a military siege. So in November, I'm part of a network of activists around the world. In November, we decided there was going to be a TEDx. Everybody's familiar with TEDx or TED? So TED Talks are big international talks. TEDx are locally organized talks. It could be something like this. It could be TEDx Golden West College. So they're locally organized, and they have speakers that come and do the 15-minute, 20-minute speech. And usually it's about ideas. So TED stands for technology, I think entertainment, and design. And it's usually new ideas. You know, Rick Warren spoke, and very high-level people that are usually elites, but that can speak to trends and kind of more future trends of where our world is going. So it's forward-thinking people. So in the Syrian conflict, there's a push to normalize within the regime-held areas. There's a goal to normalize life, to kind of say these are just foreign fighters in our country, instead of say, no, this is something that's really a real conflict. So part of this push to normalize is the TEDx Umayyad. So the government and organizers were hoping to hold TEDx Umayyad, which is in the center of Damascus. Well, in the middle of a conflict, normalizing issues is not going to help us move forward. Okay, that's a piece of propaganda. So the goal of our campaign online was to get it canceled. So that's me, if you want to follow me on Twitter, Monica Curca Pax. So I tweeted on November 7th, if free thinkers and justice seekers are busy fighting revolution, who will be attending? And I tagged TED News, another activist, TEDx, and then we created a hashtag stop TEDx Umayyad. So 2 days later, and there was about 15 of us tweeting them, 2 days later, TEDx wrote me and said, thank you for your concern. We spoke to the organizer, and he had decided to postpone the event until a safer time. So we got it canceled in 2 days of tweeting, 15 of us. So it was really awesome. It was really awesome. It's kind of a big deal. So TEDx is a pretty big deal. If you're not familiar, it kind of doesn't have the impact, but you could look it up. It's pretty awesome thing. And so they engaged with the activists personally. So we tied this vision of what we see peace to be, where everybody has a collective voice, with their brand and shame them. And that's how we used it to create a hashtag revolution. I run the Doctors for Syria campaign, and that's another thing. We're kind of telling on the ground the situation of doctors in Syria and the polio vaccines, and who is not getting polio vaccines. So all of these are trying to create a groundswell of movement to get this conflict and the situation known and understood. Okay, just last point. This is my personal philosophy. Peace building is not an occupation, it's a vocation. It's a calling. So whether you do it online, maybe you don't tweet, you don't do anything, whether you do it offline or you do it online, the most thing is build peace. And this is something I created it's just a funny little meme about what we do. Peace builders actually just sit and listen to people and help them realize a better future for themselves. Thank you so much for this time.